In Cuba, polling stations closed in a referendum for a new family code with a preliminary turnout of 68.91%. Vote counting is underway. In Brazil, a massive event called Rio Embraces Lula held in support of the former president 1 week before the elections. Ukrainian electoral authorities indicate that the turnout in the referendums to join the Russian Federation exceeded the number required to be valid in 3 of the 4 regions. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. This Sunday, Cubans took part in a popular referendum for the approval of the new family code. Polling stations closed nationwide at 7 p.m. local time and counting is underway. According to electoral authorities, preliminary figures show a turnout of 68.91% of the electoral roll. Officials stated that the referendum will require a simple majority of 50% for approval or rejection. A first preliminary result is expected to be announced on Monday and the final one on September 30th. In this regard, Tomás Amaran, Vice President of the National Electoral Council, highlighted the willingness of the Cuban government to carry out the process.
And of course, the state has played a fundamental role. Our state institutions, under the aggressions to our party, the government has also supported the realizations of this process. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. The fulfillment of these processes, despite the conditions in which we are, and much less now with the time constraints we are facing.
Miguel Díaz-Canel, President of Cuba, exercised his right to vote in the early hours of Sunday morning. The President attended polling station number 3 of the 57th electoral district in the capital, where he participated in the process along with his wife Liz Cuesta. Over 23,000 polling stations open all over the country so that Cubans could exercise their right to vote.
That this is going to be an intense day, which we reach as part of a result of a process that had to do with a fair, necessary, updated and modern norm that gives rights and guarantees to everyone, to all diversities, to all families, to all people of all creeds. It has gone through a broad popular process that brought about modifications. Remember that we work with over 25 versions of this. I believe that this is a code that started, first of all, from the social debate, because we have been recognizing in the last years that our society has become more heterogeneous.
In statements to the media after voting, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel expressed his confidence that the majority of the Cuban people will vote in favor of the new family code.
It was based on studies, on situations and court cases, on the daily experiences of different types of families, on events that have taken place at a certain moment, on the personal experiences of each person. In fact, you saw the program we had on another day. I believe it gives a tremendous richness and a very wide range. It's not a process. I don't believe that the expectation is that there will be a unanimous vote. I do believe that there will be a majority vote. The majority of people will vote in favor of the code.
Raúl Castro, leader of the Cuban Revolution, exercised his right to vote today in the referendum on the new family code, which is being held throughout the country. The General of the Army attended the Electoral Council number 2 of Playa Municipality in the capital, where he also talked with several voters about Tropical Storm Ian, which is approaching the Caribbean island. Cuban citizens highlighted the importance of the new family code for the good living of future generations.
The future above all. This is not a code for us. Today we are only going to have the enormous challenge of approving it and starting the steps of its implementations. This is going to be a code that will be fully enjoyed by the next generations, and that we already see the real transformation in our society that this new code of families will imply. So it will be a code for me and for my family, for the little ones at home, for those children who today today are still children and don't vote, because it's the legacy that we are going to leave them. A family code that protects them, that transforms them, and that will contribute significantly to their full development as persons in a free country.
For me, it is very important because they are giving us the possibility of being part of the future of this country. We are giving the possibility to future generations to live in a Cuba with more rights, with more inclusiveness, and that is very important.
Let us review the contents and purposes of the new family code.
Through the consultation of September the 25th, the people of Cuba will decide whether to adopt a new family code designed to increase civil rights within the framework of the social transformations of recent years in Cuba and the world. The text, composed of 11 titles and 474 articles, establishes solidarity and affection as the pillars on which family relationships are raised, and conceives the family as a union of people linked by affective, sentimental, and psychological ties without distinction of gender. The proposal emphasizes special support for women as the caretakers in most families and provider for the economic value of work in homes, as well as economic protection for those who work as housekeepers and caretakers. 4 types of filiation are contemplated in the code: natural procreation, adoption, assisted reproduction techniques, and bonds resulting from social affectivity, a concept that recognizes and regulates multiparentality both in birth and at later stage. It also mandates the creation of institutions to manage sanctions for domestic violence against vulnerable persons and extends rights to sexual diversities. Among the main detractors of the initiative are the religious sectors, especially the Conference of Catholic Bishops of Cuba, which consider that the text introduces gender ideology in the legislation and deforms the natural basis of the family. The debate on equal marriage in Cuba was also on the table during the drafting of the 2019 Constitution. At the same time, its approval was not possible due to the intense rejection of the Christian churches, among other social sectors.
Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, 1 week before the election, citizens expressed their support for the presidential candidate Luis Lula da Silva with a massive event called Rio Embraces Lula. The event took place at the Portela Sambo School in the city of Rio de Janeiro with a large turnout. The leader of the Brazil for Hope coalition, accompanied by the main representatives of his movement, reiterated his willingness to work for the most needy and compared his administration at the head of the country to that of the current president, highlighting the deficiencies of the Bolsonaro's administration in the economic issue and the social protection policies. Brazil's carnival takes place in February, but one on this last weekend, before the presidential election, revelers came out to the streets to show their support for their favorite candidates. From Olinda, our correspondent Brian Meir has more.
Across Brazil, people are enjoying the last Sunday before this year's elections, when many people will travel back to their hometowns to vote for president, vice president, and members of Congress. In the northeastern city of Olinda, a traditional carnival group associated with the landless workers movement brought thousands out to the streets.
Eu Acho É Pouco is an Olinda carnival group that always takes a political position and is not going to stop doing that at a moment like this. Our lives will be better with Lula.
Putting a social movement carnival group on the streets during election season is a political act, an extension of the canvassing that activists have been doing for the last month on the streets, in the schools and factories, to guarantee that the Brazilian far-right loses control of the presidency and Congress.
We are here today campaigning for the MST's first candidate in a carnival parade that is a historic field of a battle for the Brazilian people. It's important for us to be here occupying the streets so that we can elect our president and remove the genocidal one who is in office right now.
In a climate of rising political violence, a simple act of coming out to the streets to sing and dance and to wear the party colors sends a signal to the far right that Lula's supporters refuse to be intimidated.
Olinda's carnival is always a very political act. We are out here today to show our choice, which is for Lula and another Brazil.
Brian Meir, teleSUR, Olinda.
In the United States, the state of emergency declared in Florida due to the possible impact of Tropical Storm Ian, currently in the waters of the Central Caribbean Sea, is putting the people of the region on alert. In an official statement, the territory's Governor Ron DeSantis extended the warning previously issued on Saturday to cover all of Florida and urged the citizens to prepare themselves before the arrival of the storm, which he said has the potential to turn into a major hurricane. In this regard, he said that coordinations are underway with all state and local government partners to track the potential impacts of this storm, given the risk of storm surge, flooding, dangerous winds, and other adverse weather conditions throughout the area. The country's President Joe Biden also declared a state of emergency to allow federal agencies to coordinate relief and provide aid. In Canada, authorities declared a state of emergency in several regions after Hurricanes Fiona impact. After making landfall, the federal government decreed the measure for the provinces located to the east of the country. The meteorological phenomenon caused power outages in more than 50,000 homes in Nova Scotia, while on the island of Newfoundland, a person was reported missing after being swept out to sea with his home. In this context, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, expressed concern about the strong impact of the meteorological phenomenon on the Atlantic coast of the country. In El Salvador, environmental organizations denounced the contamination of the waters of Lake Suchiltlan, the Salvadoran lake of more than 13,000 hectares, which also serves as a reservoir for a hydroelectric plant and is considered of great international importance by UNESCO, is in a critical situation, according to environmental organizations. They denounced a blanket of plastic, including bottles, containers, and all kinds of plastic materials, in spite of the fact that workers of the hydroelectric plant, as well as residents of the vicinity, constantly collaborate to remove this material from the waters of the lake. The Salvadoran Minister of the Environment, Fernando Lopez, assured that every day in the country 4,200 tons of waste are generated, of which some 1,200 up in rivers, beaches, or streets of the territory. Super Typhoon Noru slammed into the Philippines on Sunday, battering the heavily populated main island of Luzon with strong winds and heavy rain that have forced thousands of people to flee their homes. The storm was packing maximum sustained winds of 195 kilometers an hour as it charged towards the archipelago nation. Noru, the strongest storm to hit the Philippines this year, hit about 100 kilometers northeast of Manila. Emergency personnel braced for the possibility of strong winds and heavy rain battering the capital. Forced evacuations were underway in some high-risk areas of the metropolis, including impoverished communities living in flimsy shacks along rivers.
We had to do preemptive evacuation because we estimate that the storm will arrive when people are sleeping, and we don't want a repeat of what happened during Typhoon Kixena and the southwest monsoon when people were caught off guard and they couldn't evacuate. That's difficult because people may lose lives.
I evacuated the house that I'm living in because I'm scared. The floods there get really high. I don't want a repeat of what happened to me before.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Ukraine, in the framework of the third day of the referendum on joining Russia, data indicate that the turnout exceeded the number required to consider the referendum valid in 3 of the 4 regions involved in the elections. According to date, electoral authorities counted a turnover of 77.12% in Donetsk, 76.9% in Lugansk, and 51.55% in Zaporizhia, surpassing the 50% required to consider the elections binding. While in the region of Kherson, a 49.91% turnout was registered during the first 72 hours of the process that will last until next September 27th. The referendum is taking place in the midst of aggressions of the Ukrainian forces against populated centers, which intensified after the beginning of the voting. In Italy, projections reported a 51% voter turnout for this Sunday's general elections. According to media reports, this turnout figure is 7 points lower than that of 2018, when there was a 58.83% turnout. 51 million Italians were called this Sunday to renew 400 of their 630 deputies and 200 of the 315 senators who have the responsibility to elect the Prime Minister. Preliminary polls gave a comfortable victory to the far-right coalition Brothers of Italy, led by Giorgia Meloni, which could give the country its first ultra-conservative government since the Second World War. On Sunday, the governments of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan reached an agreement to end their border disputes and return to a normal situation. In Kyrgyzstan, authorities expressed their hope in the fulfillment of the agreement reached between the two nations. They also confirmed that those evacuated after recent clashes between the two countries on the border can return to their homes. In addition, they also assured that the parties will withdraw military personnel from up to 8 posts in the zone of conflict. The clashes between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan started in mid-September and have resulted in over 100 dead and almost 230 wounded among civilians and military personnel of both sides. Nepal authorities consider trade with Russia in local currencies. The ambassador of Nepal to Russia, Milan Raj-Tuladahar, stated that Moscow and Nepal could establish a bilateral mechanisms of settlements in national currencies similar to the one between Russia and India, which allows exchanges between the Russian ruble and the Indian rupee. He assured that their problems in the transactions between the two countries could be solved with the appropriate banking services. In that sense, he stated that to achieve this goal, the central banks of Russia and Nepal should work together. The government in Moscow has repeatedly called on other nations to create a new world financial system in which exchanges would be made with regional currencies. In South Tome and Principe, regional elections were held to elect the 55 members of the National Assembly and the mayors of 6 of the country's municipalities. Voting in the African country is disputed among 11 political parties, of which the Prime Minister, Jorge Bom Jesus, heads the current government together with 3 political parties: the Democratic Convergence Party, the Union for Democracy and Development, and the Democratic Movement for Change. The election was held on Sunday and counted with the participation of more than 14,000 citizens. Electoral authorities assured that the election was monitored by 100 international observers. In turn, they emphasized that the archipelago is considered a model of parliamentary democracy in the continent. Top Egyptian and Sudanese authorities discussed in Cairo the situation regarding the filling and operation of the Grand Renaissance Dam built by Ethiopia on the Nile River. A statement from the Egyptian presidency detailed that the issue was discussed during a meeting between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the head of the Sudanese Sovereign Transitional Council, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The two countries' tensions with Ethiopia escalated over the past year following Addis Ababa's decision to begin filling and operating the dam, which both Cairo and Khartoum consider a danger to their water reserves. In response, Egypt and Sudan are seeking to sign a binding agreement on the management of the dam, which is rejected by Ethiopia. A boat carrying about 100 Hindu pilgrims capsized Sunday in a river in northern Bangladesh, killing at least 24 people, police said. The overcrowded boat overturned in the afternoon while returning from a Hindu temple on the other side of the river Karatoa at Poda area in Panchgarh district, said local police chief S.M. Serajul Huda. Divers and residents recovered at least 24 bodies by Sunday evening. He said, adding that at least 12 women and 8 children were among the dead. The official added that many of the passengers swam ashore. It was not immediately clear how many remained missing, but Huda said the divers continued their search. The Hindus travel to the temple where tens of thousands of people gather every year for their largest religious festival, Durga Puja, next month.
I'm a van driver. I was at the riverbank and saw a loaded boat capsize. We rushed to the spot on a boat. We rescued the bodies of 4 babies and 2 women. We also rescued some others alive. We are currently giving $193 to each family for a funeral. We are also paying for the medical expenses for the injured.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. Now you can also follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.